Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week in the economy and the markets. This week we have a deadly bacteria that kills up to 50% of the patients, now endemic to the US Gulf Coast, meaning that it happens there regularly, like it made a home. We also have new study that says that new people that get that thing in your arm from the pandemic can actually weaken your immune system. And we even have news about the new war that the US government is starting with crypto. Let's go ahead and get started. Not a whole lot of outside of the norm news this week. We didn't have a lot of economic news. We did have a lot of corporate news that came out, but for the most part, it was pretty kind of a died down week. Remember that last week they did make the agreement about the debt ceiling. And part of that agreement was that they are removing the debt ceiling completely for the next 2 years. So they can completely spend money and print on whatever they want for the next 2 years, which is not a good thing because if you have been to the grocery store lately, I'm sure you have noticed the amount of money that you're spending now on not only groceries, but on absolutely everything. And that obviously is inflation. If you didn't know, 90%, 90, of all of the dollars in existence were literally created in the last 3 years since the pandemic in 2020. That, my friend, is the reason why we're having so much inflation now. Well, the primary reason, obviously, every president on the left and the right, from Bush to Obama to Trump, everybody's been spending money like crazy. And that's why I always try to be apolitical in these programs, because I think they're both driving the car off the cliff. It's just one part is just driving a little bit slower than the other, essentially, right? But it's not good news because that means that inflation is most likely going to continue to get out of control, even though they're talking about they might be raising rates, etc. The stocks in the United States, mostly positive. The S&P 500 hit its highest level since August. Canada, which I normally call it, Canada is lower by 0.63%. Euro markets mostly lower. Istanbul popped another 10%, which was the most positive out of Europe, even though technically Turkey is in Asia and Europe. Latin America mostly higher. Africa and the Middle East mixed. And then the far east as well. Asia and Australia, all of Asia, Australia, that whole zone, they were mixed as well. In the conspiracy theory news of the week, the deadly bacteria, which kills up to 50% of patients, is now endemic to the US Gulf Coast, meaning that it's made a home there, says the CDC, just a year after it was first detected in the country. This is in the Gulf Coast. So if you think of Florida on the left side, kind of all the way up to, I think, Louisiana, I think it is. That's not good because obviously if you catch the bacteria, it's not bueno at all for you. You got a 50% chance to live. Another interesting thing that was even mentioned on Joe Rogan as well was that repeated thing in your arm from the pandemic, specifically the mRNA ones, weakens the immune system. So you could be more susceptible to things like cancer, says one of the founders of the mRNA injections, Robert Malone. And I'm going to read this word for word because I thought this was interesting. Basically, it's validating that this rush to administer and re-administer without having solid data to back up these decisions was highly counterproductive and appears to have resulted in a cohort of people that are actually more susceptible to the disease, including things like cancer. So be careful out there. Bitcoin and crypto. The main news in this space is that the U.S. government is heightening its war against crypto. Meanwhile, the other, let's call it the other end of the spectrum, a place like Russia, the largest bank there called Sberbank, is offering crypto trading services. So the U.S. sued the U.S. being the SEC, the Securities and I forgot what the Securities and it's not going to come to me. But anyway, the department that basically regulates securities. I'll look for it here in a second. I'll tell you what it means. But they sued Coinbase, which is the largest crypto exchange in the United States. And they also sued the biggest exchange in the world, which is called Binance. And the founder of Binance, called Changpeng Zhao, which is Chinese. So one of the things that they're accusing Binance of doing is 13 charges of the world's largest crypto exchange and its CEO of operating an illegal platform in the US and misuse of customer funds. They're basically saying that he was moving around the money to different exchanges that they basically control, the founder one of the founders, the Changpeng guys, CZ is what they call them. And then they made it look like there was more volume on the Binance exchange. And then Coinbase was sued in a New York federal court on Tuesday, alleging that they're operating as an unregistered broker and exchange. And I think this is really funny because Coinbase has been one of the biggest proponents of trying to ask the SEC and sending them letters about how to operate, right? They want guidelines to be able to make sure they're within the rules. But I think they did it on purpose where they kind of kept everything vague. And then all of a sudden, when now they want to crack down on it, it's like, oh, you're not following the rules. Well, we asked you for the rules, but you never gave them to us. Convenient, isn't it? So Bitcoin on the news was down, and a lot of other of the meme coins and all the other cryptos as well. Bitcoin was down over 6% to just under 25,600. So if you guys remember, we had 2 or 3 weeks of kind of that stagnant consolidation, and then now we see a little bit of a pop, which is what I mentioned to you guys in the last few weeks. Obviously, you can't tell whether it's going to be up to the downside. There's probabilities, but now we're starting to get a little bit of movement. In commodities, U.S. corn crop deteriorates after the Midwest is hit with a worst drought in decades. About 34% of the corn production within the area is now experiencing a drought. If you remember the last few weeks, we had the same situation with olive oil, with the droughts and the problems with the weather in places like Spain, which is the biggest producer of olive oil. We talked about the rice. You see how this is just kind of coming at you from everywhere. So make sure you wear protection. Saudi energy minister shared that they're going to do a surprise cut of an additional 1 million barrels of oil. Oil is in a bit of a free fall, not collapsing per se, but it's been consistently going negative week after week. This is due to the fact that the expectation about what's going to happen to the economy is not bueno at all. You know, if we're in a recession and there's contraction, that means that there's less activity. If there's less activity, that means that less people are buying oil. So U.S. crude went down 2.23% to $70.17. Brent, which is the international crude, went down 1.79% to $74.79. And coffee as well surged to its highest level in price on the Futures London exchange since 2008 this week, meaning that your coffee might get a little bit more expensive. I have 25,000 trees, by the way, if you want some. Gold went up 0.67% to $1,961.70. And silver went up almost 3%, $24.38. This mainly has to do with the drop in the dollar that happened this week, the overall dollar per se. It went down hard against the Colombian peso. Financial and banking news. The Americans have pulled out $472 trillion out of banks in the past 3 months due to the situation with the banking collapses. It's the biggest quarterly decline since they started reporting these numbers in 1984. If you don't know what's going on with the banks, there was a series of them that absolutely collapsed. It was the second and third largest bank collapses in history of the United States. So people are a little bit concerned, so they want to get their money out of the bank to make sure that it's secured. Political news, the far-right alternative in Germany, which is called the AfD, has gained enormously in the polls. And Trump has officially been indicted on 37 counts, which includes willful retention of national defense information, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and also false statements. He's now going to get head to court in, I believe it's Miami, which he could have a possibility of prison if he's convicted. Economic news, the Labor Department in the United States, Americans are starting to file for a lot more unemployment benefits. There was a surprise surge in the people asking for unemployment claims by 28,000. So now the number is 261,000. This again shows what's really happening with the economy. In corporate news, the Biden administration is finally helping Tesla with their crusade to promote the EVs or the electric vehicles in the United States. They are providing billions of dollars in subsidies for the electric charging stations. And now Tesla is going to be possibly eligible if they also support what's called the CCS connection, when Tesla, for the most part, has supported the NACS connection. So the only thing there is that now Ford and GM have made announcements that they're going to adopt the Tesla way of charging. So now Tesla can receive up to $2 billion extra due to now that all their charging stations are going to be open to all the other car manufacturers charging. And now they're going to have an adapter, for example, to be able to plug in and things like that, which is interesting. And Allstate, the massive insurance company, has announced that they're going to drop all California and not write any new insurance policies over wildfires and construction costs. In trade news, Poland's agricultural minister has drafted a regulation from the European Commission that extends the ban on imports on some Ukrainian food products. This includes Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia. This is due to the fact now, since there was a blockade, remember that, we thought everybody was going to not have food because Russia was blocking the food out of the Ukraine, and Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of Europe for a reason because they grow so much food. Now all that food is coming in all at once, and it's just dropping the prices to the floor and affecting a lot of the farmers in the countries that I just mentioned. So they're trying to restrict that, even though they're going to allow it in the other countries in the EU, to make sure that they don't bankrupt all the farmers like they're trying to do in the United States and the Netherlands. The European Commission is also saying that they want to make an agreement on a trade agreement between the EU and Mercosur. Mercosur is the market of the South, which includes Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. They want to work with Latin America to reduce excessive dependency on third countries, mainly because they want to secure all the raw materials that Latin America has. And if you come in Medellin, you can find some of those. Some of you will get that joke. Investment news, the EU countries are trying again to pass a new deal for renewable energy targets, but countries like France and others are stalling and not wanting to make the agreements because technically they don't consider nuclear energy to be renewable, when technically it is, until there's some kind of accident and you can't live 100 kilometers or 100 miles from the nuclear plant. Credit ratings agency Moody's is saying that UK house prices are set to fall 10% over the next 2 years as a more severe downturn in the housing market could trigger a lengthy recession. Remember that India, if I'm not mistaken, overtook the UK already as the largest economy, sixth largest economy, if I'm not mistaken. Let me count here. It's the United States, China, Japan, Germany. Then after that, I believe it's India. And then after that, the UK. So they're still one of the top 10 countries in the world. So it affects quite a bit the global economy. International events, there was a dam that was burst, sending millions of gallons of water to towns downstream, pointing the finger. Ukraine says Russia did it. Russia said Ukraine did it. But that's continuing to escalate. They're even sending their nuclear warheads now to Belarus. Russia is, so that's not bueno. And now Iran claimed that they just developed a new hypersonic missile capable of traveling 15 times the speed of sound, which is has a range of 1,400 kilometers, 870 miles. Not buenos. This is a country that wants to literally wipe the United States off the map. And if you didn't know, the United States doesn't have any hypersonic missiles. So all those defense systems that we have won't even work because these missiles are so fast, they'll just completely go right by the missiles that we shoot in defense. Awesome. Canadian forest fires are causing a red twilight in New York and other cities as well in the Northeast. I'm sure you guys saw some of the videos. It literally looked orange. It looked like Mad Max, so stay safe out there. And an interesting fact this week, according to a study published on Wednesday, scientists document the first known instance of a virgin birth by a crocodile from a crocodile living in isolation for 16 years in a Costa Rican zoo. I thought that was pretty interesting. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.